Just north of Tel Aviv, Israel.
North of Tel Aviv. What's the name of it exactly?
It's called Ra'anana.
Okay, spell that.
Raanana.
Ra'anana.
Very good. Well done.
Okay, all right. What is special about that city?
Actually, what makes it special is it's a very international place. You have a lot of languages spoken here in the streets. It's actually pretty green for an Israeli city. It's almost like a typical suburb, a U.S. suburb, just outside of Tel Aviv. Kind of a nice family place. We love it.
Is it a high tech community?
So there is some high tech right here in Ra'anana. It's actually developing quite a bit, but the country is so small, and the main high tech corridor really is in the center of the country. So you're no more than 20, 30 minutes from most of the places that are kind of the centers of high tech in the country.
Okay, well, I didn't mention it at the start, so I will now. That's Yoav Schwartz. He's in Israel. He joins us by Skype. This is ThinkTech, and we call this show The Next Best Thing. And in fact, I'm calling it actually, Yoav, Referrals from Israel. Yeah, okay?
Right.
It's a reference to your special product. And your special product is WhoDoYou, which I want to go into in some detail with you. But let me say thanks very much for staying up late. We have a show that we connect with Brussels. We call it Midnight in Europe, off Woody Allen, you know. So this is Midnight in Israel. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me. Even at 1 a.m., we're happy to be here.
1 a.m. Oh, of course,
Yeah.
because Israel is further to the east, so therefore 1 more hour. Okay, well, I feel even more appreciative then to know that. So
I challenge
before
most people to find it on a map, even though it's so small.
Well, you know, I was looking up, I was telling you about my friend who lives in this kibbutz on the east side of Israel, and I was looking it up on Google Earth, you know, to see what was there and all that. Well, gee whiz, I mean, it was this is not good for security purposes, but you could see the whole kibbutz. You could see every building in the kibbutz. You could get down on the highway and drive the highway, you know, from anywhere in the world using Google Earth. That's quite something. His name is Michael Jones. I met him. We had him as a speaker one time. The guy who conceived and originally, you know, set up Google Earth. But it's quite a program, and I bet we could do that in Ra'anana too.
That's true. You could.
Yeah. Anyway, so first let's know more about you, and then we'll talk about your product WhoDoYou, which I'm really curious about. So you're an American. Tell us, you know, the adventure by which you got from I guess, growing up in America to doing tech in Israel.
Sure. Well, very, very quickly, I grew up in Connecticut, in New Haven, and went to school in Boston, worked there for a while, went back to graduate school there, did an MBA, and then went out to Seattle to work for a startup. It was actually not so early of a startup. It was a company that was originally based in Los Alamos, spin out of the national labs, and went up to Seattle. Interesting company. I was there for a couple of years, and that ultimately that got sold. And I was in Seattle. You have no choice. Eventually, you end up working at Microsoft if you're in tech. So I got sucked into the beast. I was there for about 4 years, and then Microsoft bought a company here in Israel, and I came out essentially to help build out the product team and help with the integration. And to stay with Microsoft for 4 years here in Israel, and we decided that we liked it. I came with my wife. We had 3 kids at the time. I had 1 more. And we decided we were going to stay. So at a certain point, I decided that I was ready to go back to small companies. So I jumped ship from Microsoft. Had this idea to start WhoDoYou.
That's great. So are you in a tech community? I mean, do you have the same sort of intellectual gratification that you would have in Silicon Valley with people all around you speak the same language?
It is incredibly fertile here. I think really Silicon Valley is the best comparison. Of course, there's a lot of companies, or I should say communities around the world that are cropping up. But it is an incredibly rich ecosystem here of not just startups, but established companies, venture funds. There really is kind of the whole food chain, if you will. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of it.
I've had some Israeli business clients in my practice of law. I was always impressed with how creative they were and how the world was their oyster. It didn't matter a bit to fly from there to here, do business at great distance. So what about on the personal side? I mean, do you like raising kids in Israel? Is it like an American suburban community where everything's pretty comfortable and suburban? And how are you affected by the fact that there's a war going on every now and then?
Yeah. So what I would say is putting aside the broader conflicts, raising kids here is wonderful. There's a lot of independence, a lot of freedom that they have. It's quite common for kids to walk down the street. All the kids walk to school. Kids go to after school activities on their own pretty frequently and from a pretty young age. So it's a delightful place. We find there's a really interesting mix of people. A lot of languages are spoken in this little community where we are. Pretty just a wide swath of people. So that we like very much. And in general, Israel is really in many ways a melting pot like the U.S. You have people that have come from all over the world, and it's quite interesting. I think people also sometimes don't understand just how multicultural it is. What a vibrant democracy it is. There's 20% of the population here is Arab. You've got very liberal laws for parental leave. For gay rights. It's a very kind of interesting, welcoming, wild place. And so in general, we love it. This conflict is complicated. It's been difficult, on a lot of levels, personally and professionally. Everybody feels it to some degree. But there is an attitude here that you can't let these things be in the way of continuing on. And so people, I think, both personally and professionally, make a great effort to try not to allow it to stop things in their tracks, because otherwise, you could be stopping quite often. So I'm sure we could talk a lot more about that, but technology is probably more interesting.
Okay, let's talk about WhoDoYou. Where did the idea come from, and tell us what it does.
So, look, the honest truth is the idea really came from me being an avid user of Amazon way back. And I always read product reviews because I'm a hyper researcher. And I always wondered, who are these people writing the reviews? And it started to occur to me that when you get to local services, so we had been renovating a house at the time, and we needed a lot of the plumbers and electricians and, the whole thing. And I wondered, where could I find good recommendations for those people? And it occurred to me that it was really important for me to be able to get trusted recommendations. So I wouldn't necessarily want to just go online and randomly choose an architect or an engineer. You really want to have confidence in who you're choosing. And so we looked around and really felt there was no site that had this degree of the kind of local service and personal recommendation, kind of trusted referrals. And that's where the idea came from. And I would say, and I'm happy to go into some detail in the company, but I would say that subsequently, I've learned the incredible problem of biased reviews, manipulated reviews, which is actually only getting worse, and I'm happy to go into it, but it makes us all the more pleased that we've tried to take on this problem, because fundamentally there's a real issue with getting trusted recommendations, and the model that we have is something that's frankly quite different.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I've thought about that in a journalistic context. In Hawaii, we have a philanthropist by the name of Piero Migliar, and he's the founder of eBay. The magic of eBay is to bring strangers together to trust each other. eBay is all about trust. And I mean, we can talk about how that works. Well, in the journalistic sense, in online journalism, it's all about, who you believe. It's credibility, which is another kind of trust. And he established something called Peer News, which is the trade name is Civil Beat, which is associated with mainland media, and which has a bunch of journalists who write articles every day about local news and international news. They have a Washington office and all that. And one of the interesting things about Civil Beat is that it doesn't use the same trust arrangements that eBay does. And I hope that one of these days they get to that. But it's all about, for eBay, as you know, it's all about getting rated. And, if you have good ratings over a period of time historically, you'll be, at a higher percentage of credibility, and therefore people will find it easier to deal with you and buy from you and sell to you and so forth. So are we talking about the same thing? Is WhoDoYou based on that kind of thing, where an individual making a statement is rated by people, and therefore we know who is telling the truth?
So it's actually a little bit different, because one of the issues with trust, in any trust model, there's no perfect solution for trust. But at the end of the day, what I often will say is, if you think about trust, you want to know that something is honest or is truthful. Something being honest and truthful doesn't necessarily mean that it's right or that it's going to be helpful for you, but you at least want to know that there's no manipulation or bias or some ulterior motive. And if you think about it, and people don't often really pull back all the layers of the onion, but if you're searching for some kind of local service, or let's just say you need a dentist, it's something you don't want to just choose out of the yellow pages or the old yellow pages. If you ask a friend of yours and somebody says, it's somebody that you know, and you say, do you know a great dentist? And they say, sure, I've used Dr. Johnson for years. He's amazing, always giving me great care. You don't need to go out and ask 10 more people and verify, is that true? You have a friend who you trust who says they've gotten a great service. That for you is trust. You can believe what they're saying. Now, it may be that they got lucky. Maybe this dentist is no good. But at the very least, you feel you can rely on it. And what we've tried to do is basically build the same model in an online system, and something that allows people to be able to trust the recommendations, whether they're from your friends or they're from other people in your area, and I'll get into that in a minute. And at the end of the day, what we really want is for people to come to the site and say, I know that I can trust that this is an honest, authentic opinion, it's authentic advice people are sharing with each other. That's our goal, that's our mission, and that's the way we operate.
Okay, you got my attention. How exactly do you give that level of confidence to a stranger who's never been there before? What do you tell him about the system, and what is the system where you vet the information and give him, that confidence?
Sure. So I'll describe very briefly what we do, and then hopefully explain why it's really quite unique and why there's nothing else like it, at least today. What we do is we have gone to the source where people have trusted conversations where they're happening already. And that's primarily in social networks. So if you think about on Facebook, a very typical example, if somebody, let's say, is looking for a mechanic, they might write on their Facebook newsfeed, hey, does anybody in Detroit have a great mechanic? Or does somebody in San Diego know a great mechanic? My car broke down, I'm really in the bind. Now, the person who posts that is posting it out to presumably their friends. So it's 300, 400 friends, whatever number it is, who will see that post. And then what happens is friends respond back, and they'll say, sure, I've been going to Al's Garage for years. They're amazing. Call them at XY number. Now, when you see that conversation, even if it's in a public forum, and at WhoDoYou, we can only identify public conversations, what happens is you know that one person is honestly asking, another person is honestly answering. And so what we do as a company, what WhoDoYou has developed, is a system that scans social networks every day, all the time, looking for public conversations where people are asking these questions about referrals for local services and where other people are responding back with their recommendations. And because this is a trusted conversation, it's between either two friends or two people that are in the same community group, you know that you can believe that it's an honest answer that somebody's giving.
Well, is it not manipulatable? Why can't I say I'm trying to trick the public? Why can't I have a conversation with a shill, and we both have this glorious conversation about Al's Garage, and none of it is true, but there it is on the internet?
So you certainly can, it's possible. But what happens on Facebook is when somebody writes a post and they put it out to the world of Facebook, what happens is you're posting it so your friends will see. In other words, people who are on Facebook are on Facebook because they're connected to friends. So let's say you do that post, 300 people will see it. And now if somebody else responds back, their 200 or 300 friends will see it. And what happens is when people get into that environment, they tend to stop lying and they tend to stop being dishonest. And what they'll often say is, I need a great dentist. And somebody might respond back and say, my brother-in-law is a great dentist, or I have a cousin, or I'm a great dentist, call. But at least they're identifying the honest sort of conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest. Now, and so that's very, very crucial. The other thing I'll say is that we give people the opportunity, if they want, to log in with Facebook. And if people log in with Facebook and they provide their permissions, we can actually scan through the discussions that are not public, but that are on their own newsfeed, and we can pull out any recommendations that are private to them. So only you'll see them, but those are private recommendations.
Oh, this is great.
So,
I have so many questions. I want to take you through all my questions. We might be here a long time, Yoav. That's Yoav Schwartz. He joins us from, I got to read my handwriting, Da'anana, which is north of Tel Aviv in Israel, by Skype, here on the Next Best Thing, ThinkTech Talks. We're going to take a minute for a break. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin is Bang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Amashta, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, we're here, we're back, we're live with Israel. We're in the next best thing, talking to Yoav Schwartz, who joins us from Danana, in north of Tel Aviv in Israel. And despite the hostilities in Gaza, despite all the effect of that on the state of Israel, business goes on, life goes on every day. I've heard that from other Israelis too, and so it's great to be able to talk to him as a matter of just doing business on his business, which is these days WhoDoYou, which is a startup making sort of group or evaluating group information to make recommendations on I guess service and other contracts arrangements that you might need in your life. So Yoav, to go back to the credibility engine, if you will. So if you're able to get into the public statements made by people on Facebook, exactly how do you put that in the database? I mean, it's not like you, Yoav Schwartz, is going to be able to sit there, read all that, and then make some judgment on it. There's got to be a way that you can bring that into a recommendation. How do you do that?
Sure. So I won't go into all the details. I don't want to bore people too much, but effectively what we do is Facebook has a mechanism that you can search for public conversations. And so every day, really every hour, we're pulling in massive amounts of data into our system. And then what we do is we have a set of algorithms that we've built. We actually use a machine learning technique to try to identify the questions that are specifically related to these kinds of requests people make. So, hey, does anybody have a recommendation for a caterer? Does anybody know a good electrician that I can use? Those kinds of things. So we identify the patterns of the questions. And then once we have a question and we can identify a category that fits within the local service sort of framework, we then go and we search for responses that will include any kind of a business name, contact information, and we also need to be able to determine location, which is not so easy. And so basically what we're doing, a way to think about this is there's this massive amount of unstructured data, and we're trying to structure it and make it searchable and usable for anybody after the fact. Meaning, if you think about Google, they don't create information. Google is just very, very effective at cataloging, identifying information, putting it in proper sort of syntax so that when you do a search, you find the information you need. In some ways, we're doing a similar kind of thing, but very focused on social networks, very focused on recommendations for local services.
I remember the term social networking analysis, where, it's what they use to identify terrorists. It's based on keywords and the number of iterations of a particular keyword, and then you start making conclusions and you sort of bring it into a narrower and narrower subset, and then after a while you have a conclusion that you actually work with. And I guess that's what you mean when you talk about algorithm. The algorithm goes through vast amounts of text messages that you find on Facebook or maybe elsewhere, and examine them on the basis of keywords. And you have to write algorithms that will pick the keywords and the number of repetitions of the keywords and make sense of that. Am I right?
Yes, and another way to think about it is we all know that there's massive amounts of data swimming everywhere, and big data has become a very fashionable term. And what I always like to think about is that there are these verticals, within all this information that's just flowing, horizontally. If you just took a slice, if you had a filter, and you could slice through and only pull out the bits of information that are related to, you were given an example of national security. In our case, it's local services. There's a company that's doing something similar in the pharmaceutical industry where they're trying to gather people's discussions, conversations about certain drugs or medications and be able to categorize information. What are people saying about it? So there's a tremendous amount that you can do If you have very intelligent algorithms, if you got smart people, which luckily I've hired, not myself included, and if you're very focused, that's the other thing, is it's hard to do it across every category. If you are looking in specific at, like I said, local service providers, or if you're looking at, could be products, electronics, those things can be very effective. It's just difficult to get it to the point where the accuracy is high enough that it's really useful for people at the end of the day. And that's what we think a lot about, is creating a solution that's easy for people to use.
Okay, before we finish on the search side of this, and I'd like to get to the delivery side, the deliverables side in a minute, but where else do you get it, aside from public statements, public conversations that are on Facebook? Where else can you go? You referred to maybe not so public things. I mean, how do you get it, and are there privacy issues?
So we look primarily at Facebook. We've started going to some other groups, things like Yahoo groups. We scan Twitter. Those are the main areas that we look. And also, people can write reviews on WhoDoYou, except that people must log in with a valid Facebook ID. And the reason there is that we then have some sort of identification. You have some sort of authentic, kind of identifiable way to understand who this person is and whether they're real or whether they're fake. So those are the basic sources. And what I said before about the private conversations, those are it's primarily within Facebook, and it's a pretty well-established model, which is that Facebook has a set of permissions. If an app or in an application wants to access more information, and the user can decide they want to log in, they want to give their permission, or they don't. In this case, the way I often will, the analogy I often use is Google about 10 years ago came out with a desktop search tool. And so you had the you had the opportunity, if you wanted to download the tool, and you could do a great scan of your PC at the time, because everybody had PCs, and you could make it very easy to find any information that's on your machine. And that was great. It was a terrific utility. It's your information. It makes it very easy to find stuff that is within kind of your purview. If you don't want to download it, you don't need to.
Yeah. Sounds great. I mean, what was the name of that again? Is this still around?
I think it's been incorporated into most operating systems, but it was called Google Desktop Search.
I remember that.
Feels like ages ago.
Yeah. But ages is a relative term these days. Anyway, so now you have all this, huge amount of data, and you've used an algorithm to search for, say, a plumber, and then you've used another algorithm to say, people saying good, bad, use them, don't use them, and now you have an algorithm to kind of make a conclusion based on what you find. Suppose, and all with a view to provide advice for someone who's looking for a plumber. So if I sign up on WhoDoYou,
Yeah.
And I'm looking for a plumber, what's my user experience like?
Sure. So you actually don't even need to sign up. If you come to the site, very often what happens is people will do a search within Google. They'll see a link to our site. You just need to fill in two things. You go to WhoDoYou.com and you type in, I'm searching for let's say, plumber in, let's say, Honolulu. Find. And then what you get back are a list of plumbers that have been recommended by various people at various different times in various fora, I should say. And the way to think about it is that imagine that you could just sort of capture all that conversation that was flying by over the last year and a half, and anytime somebody was recommending Joe the plumber, we'd be able to capture that, and then we'd be able to put it with his sort of business listing, and then you doing that search, you'd be able to find the information, the people that have recommended Joe as a plumber.
So I just get what you have. I mean, you're not putting a special whammy on it, a special interpretive, judgment program. You're not rating it or ranking it or giving me sort of a metric. You're just saying you want to know what people are saying about Joe the plumber. Here it is. Is that what it is?
Well, close, although we do have something that we call a relevancy ranking. So we try to be pretty clear to say this is it's not an absolute score, because we can't tell you whether a person is a 10 or a 1 in actual fact. But what we can say is if you do that search and you get 100 results, we want to try to order it in such a way that we think the most relevant results will be first. So we give you some numerical way of ordering them. That number is based on a variety of factors, which includes how recent the recommendations were, how many there are, of what quality they are, whether any of your friends have recommended this person. So we just try to aggregate that stuff to make it easier for you. But at the end of the day, you can search through, you choose the one that's the best fit for you. And we just want you to have good, quality, trusted recommendations.
Well, now suppose you have an item that's very popular. I mean, like take, I don't know, the next iPhone, for example. There'll be a huge amount of traffic about that. There'll be, I want to say, millions of people who will have comments about the next iPhone as soon as it comes out. What do you do when I come and ask you, Yoav, tell me about what you have, what your crawler, so to speak, found on the next iPhone? Are you going to give me millions of lines of text?
So we actually don't do products. We do mostly local businesses, local services. We've been asked, I would say, more than a few times to evolve into that space, and at some point we may consider doing it. But what you find with products is that exactly what you said. I mean, it's a perfect summary. That very often you will have this massive spike in a few products. So people are talking about iPad, iPhone, Samsung Galaxy, the Kindle Fire. You have those, and that you can find tons of information everywhere. And then the curve, just drops straight down. So, how many people have the Bosch coffee maker that has the timer and is in Chrome, and it starts to get to be very, very small numbers, and people don't often talk about specific product numbers on social media. So we're really focused on local services, local businesses, although, like I said, there's an opportunity. If somebody were really focused, they could probably do something like that, and I've actually talked to a few companies that are poking around that space.
Well, I'll give you a thought on that. I do a lot with B&H Photo. I don't know if you deal with them. They're in New York. It's a department store of photography. It's the best in the world. It's huge. It's a city block. And they are really, really terrific. Anyway, when you go on their site, you're looking for a Z5U. That's our brand, our model of camera here. If you're looking for a Z5U, they will be asking everyone who bought a Z5U from them to report back. Now, of course, not everybody does. If only a fraction do. But there's an awful lot of reports that come back, and they keep them all. And you can, and of course they have some kind of metric on it, 5 stars, 4 stars, whatnot. So you can look at them ordered by the number of stars, and you can see all the comments that anybody ever made. And I always look at that stuff. I always learn tons of information by looking at what their customers say about their, arcane products. So I kind of agree that it's a dangerous business to get into doing that from Facebook. And B&H Photo has a living database that they have access to. You're not going to have access to that. How could you possibly compete with them on that level?
Well, what I'd say there is there's 2 important insights, I think, embedded in what you just described. Number 1 is community, and number 2 is a trust system that works.
Yeah.
So in the first case, you have a community of people that there's a very small niche of people that are into these, this specific gear, I mean, in relative terms, but they're very passionate. And if you can find a place to organize that community, they're going to be very, very eager to share in many cases, again, in relative terms. And so those are really crucial to tap into. And if you use the analogy, our community is the community of people that are friends on Facebook. So that's where you get the circle of trust. And then the second is, if you talk about the trust system, in that case you have an authority, so it's B&H, and they're the ones that are moderating, and hopefully they're making sure that these are people who bought the equipment and actually have it, and are not just posting something because they're representatives of the company. Like I said earlier, you need to have a trust system that works for the category that you're in. One of the reasons that local services and local businesses have not had a real winner emerge yet, clearly Yelp has been a winner in restaurants, but when you talk about local services, there's Angie's List, there's a couple others, nobody's really broken out in terms of trusted. It's because it's so fragmented. It's very hard to get the dynamics lined up properly so that you can get enough information and you can get it high trust. And that's why the approach we've taken is so different and has proven to be so effective.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about Angie's List. I mean, they've been advertising in Hawaii. They haven't really broken in here, They want to come to Hawaii, so they've been advertising. People should leave reviews of various, plumbers and what. Why do you have an advantage over them? You said they haven't really been able to, do what they had intended to do. What's missing with them that you have?
Well, so I was going to say there's two things, but only one thing. Only one thing that well, I'm talking about their economic model. The Angie's List has been around for 20 years. They've never made a profit. They're a public company, and it's hard in this space to make money. So I don't at all fault them, but I would say I think that's one challenge that they face, that they've actually not proven yet how they can economically make the model work. But the other thing that Angie's List I think misses is that there's still an element of trust factor that you don't know who's writing these reviews. So what Angie's List says is, if you sign up for a subscription to Angie's List, then you can leave a review. And so they have that wall that they say, well, who would sign up for a subscription, just to leave a review? And it turns out if you pay, $3 or $5 a month for their subscription, it's not so bad to sign up and then write reviews of, let's say, it's your own business, or bad reviews of somebody else's business. The second thing is that you don't have any notion of whether these people are connected to you in any way. There's no social component. And it actually turns out, a report just came out a few months ago, that Angie's List, they have a rating on a A, B, C, D, F scale. And it turned out that anybody that gave a grade to a provider on Angie's List of anything less than a B, Angie's List would call them up and say, are you sure it was really bad? Maybe you want to give them a B or higher.
Oh, I don't like that at all.
Yep, look it up. It's been very well documented. So, Angie's does a lot of things right. I don't want to knock the company, but it's hard to get this thing done in such a way that people really can have the trust. So I think their challenge is both the kind of the economic model, the scaling, and the trust. Again, like I said before, our thing that really differentiates is the trust model. And the other thing, which I didn't mention earlier, but our ability to scale is quite different, because we're capturing English conversations everywhere around the world. So we have recommendations in Kuala Lumpur and in Johannesburg and in Toledo, Ohio. It doesn't matter. If people are having these conversations, we capture them, we pull them in, we structure them, and then we let people use the data, and it's great. We see people using it all the time.
I'm starting to get very interested in this. That's Yoav Schwartz. He's in Da Nang, which is north of Tel Aviv. He joins us by Skype here on ThinkTech Talks, the next best thing. Referrals from Israel, I call it. We're going to take a few seconds off now. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Elion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community.
Okay, we're back. We're live with Yoav Schwartz. By now it must be nearly 2 o'clock in Da Nang, Israel, north of Tel Aviv. He joins us by Skype. Thank you for staying up, Yoav.
No problem. Just getting started here.
You look very refreshed. What can I say? Must be good living. I remember when I was in Israel in 1978, I fell in love with the yogurt. I could eat Israeli yogurt all day long. It's really got the special taste to it. And fresh vegetables, fabulous. It was very healthy. Anyway, so going back to what you're doing with WhoDoYou. So you're going to be giving me what? What does it look like that I get from you? Is it a page of text? Is it recommendations that come off a sort of list of possible recommendations you might make? I mean, how much trouble is it for me to digest what you're saying?
So it's a really good question, because we've invested a lot of time in trying to make it easy for people to digest exactly that. It's one thing to be able to identify the conversation. It's another to be able to identify the recommendation. It's another thing to put it together. But then it's a whole additional level of effort to try and capture the business details with that. And so the easiest way to think about this is put aside all this stuff about machine learning and algorithms and technology. Just imagine you're doing a search. Imagine you go to a Yellow Pages site. You search for an appliance repair guy in Boulder, Colorado. You'll get a set of results, and it's a listing, an ordered list of businesses in Boulder, Colorado. we're going to give you the same thing. You're going to see an ordered list of businesses. It could be on our website. We have a mobile app on Android, on iOS. The fundamental thing is you'll see a list of businesses, but they're ordered in what we call, again, relevancy to the social recommendations for those businesses. So that when you click on that first result for appliance repair in Boulder, you'll come to a page that has a business listing. It should have a business name and an address and a map, and it will have the conversations that have happened on social media where people have recommended this business.
So you can make
really
a decision
nice,
pretty quick that way.
Exactly. And in fact, what we see is people, particularly from mobile, we can see them just clicking on call this business, and we're getting thousands and thousands of calls each month of people just calling directly to these businesses because it's so easy to make a decision. You know, you can trust the information.
So you mentioned that I can go on and do this. Can I do it now? Can I go on WhoDoYou right now?
Sure.
And I can get that information. I have to try this. Sorry, I haven't tried it in preparation.
No problem.
And then, you know, when I do that and I get the information, I mean, what's your business model? Are you just being nice to me? Or are you trying to grow it sort of like Google did, that, you know, you grow it and make it better and better and better until it becomes habit forming for the world? Is that your model?
Yeah, you know, we do want to be nice to you, and you know, we hope everybody has a good experience. But the business model really is first and foremost, we want to be the place that people go to find trusted recommendations. And if you think about the incredible amount of demand there is every day, people searching for these kind of local services, it's in the millions every day of people that are searching. And if you think about how much people are paying for each one of these services, it's a big price tag. And so we want to be at the nexus. We want to be the place where people go to find providers, and we want to be the place where providers go to list their services, to connect with their users. With that as a high level, there's a set of kind of tiered services that we plan to offer for small businesses. The first of which is already available, which is a premium profile, so they can sign up and put logo and picture and, you know, their full business information and their hours of operation and description, et cetera. And then it kind of will move out from there in terms of being able to put out offers, to close transactions on the site, to integrate with scheduling. There's a lot of pieces, but fundamentally the most important thing for us is to be a great place where people come to find the businesses. And once businesses are getting leads from this location, they want to be a part of the platform.
So you want to grow in large part by word of mouth. I mean, it's the way Google grew, I guess, which means that you're changing things under the hood all the time, which means that you're following the way social media is evolving and expanding, and you're adapting your search systems and reporting systems to those changes. Am I right? You know, this is a work in progress, you know, until you hit a kind of critical mass, and then it's WhoDoYou is all over the, you know, everybody's lips. I mean, is this the plan? I mean, because right now you're not making any money, right?
So we're making very little amounts of money. It's really not the focus. As you said, you know, this is a platform business, and so just like Google when they started off, and you know, I would say some other technology companies, not all, but many where there's a transaction very close by, and I think that's what made Google such a valuable model. You know, their first goal was to get a lot of people coming and using the platform. Once you have people doing searches, now you have advertisers that say, oh, this is where people are finding their information. This is where they're making their purchase decision. We need to be there. And that's why people start paying $1, $2, $3, $5, $10 a click, because they know it's going to lead to business. In the very same way, people, when they go to WhoDoYou, if they're making their decision on which appliance repair guy, that's going to be $100, or gardener is going to be $150, or maybe it's $1,000 over the course of a year, that's a very valuable place to be. And so they want to make sure they're represented properly and that they're going to get their leads through WhoDoYou.
Talking about ads, I mean, so I'm looking for a plumber, and I type in plumber, and on the right-hand side of the result page, there's a bunch of ads by plumbers. I mean, is that a possible model for you?
It is possible right now. I've been very dedicated to try to keep that stuff out as much as possible.
I understand.
The main reason is this is all about integrity. We want people to come to the site and know the information that they're getting is unvarnished. It's not been filtered by anything. It's just purely what people are saying, and then let the businesses have themselves represented, you know, fully on their page, or let them, you know, create an offer that allows the user to say, I'm willing to choose this one over that one, or what have you. We don't want to be playing this cat and mouse game where users aren't sure who they should be choosing. We want them to choose based on who's the best.
Yeah. So we have only a couple of minutes left, Yoav. and I want to let you get some rest tonight. So I guess my question is, where's this going? Where's it going for you, for the people? I assume you have programmers, in Israel, and you have servers somewhere. Where is it going in terms of the infrastructure that you need to build it, the code that you need to change to evolve it, the PR that you have to do, to make it ubiquitous, and sort of following social media, becoming ubiquitous. How do you see that happening?
So I break, to be very concise, I break it into three parts. There's three things that we need to do very well, and then I think the rest will take care of itself. Number one, content. So we have to continue to drive more content, high quality, and multiple sources, and that we're making a lot of progress on. Number two is user engagement. So when people come, they find great information, that's terrific. We want them to then be able to say to their friends, like you mentioned before, this is a great site to go to, share with their friends, like it, even contribute content. That's the second thing. And the third thing is we want to start bringing businesses on board. So we haven't focused on it yet, but we have a lot of interest. We actually get written to very frequently, dozens of times per day, actually, believe it or not, with businesses contacting us to say, can I list myself? How can I put in more information? We want to be able to give them a great experience and really provide a lot of value. And then this becomes a good tool for them to develop new business. So we do those three things well, I think we'll be in great shape.
How popular worldwide are you now, and how popular do you want to be, and how long do you think it'll take you to get there?
Well, so we recently crossed 500,000 users, and that was a big milestone for us. It's not easy in the local search space because these are very valuable searches. When people type into Google, I'm looking for a photographer in Boston. There's a lot of people that want to show up high in those search results, and so we've done pretty well there. We've grown about 500% over the last 6 to 7 months. So we're doing pretty well. The goal is for us to continue to grow. It doesn't have to be on a logarithmic scale. It just has to be continued, steady, and we have to give a great experience to users. If we do that, they'll tell their friends, they'll come back to use it, and we'll be in good shape.
And all I have to do is go on the web and go to WhoDoYou, and I can have the experience you're talking about, and I can see it for myself, and maybe even select a good plumber.
You can indeed. In fact, send us some feedback on Honolulu. On Hawaii. I'll do a search right after this and see what kind of results we get.
Okay. It's really been great talking with you, Yoav, and I appreciate you staying up for us. Yoav Schwartz in Danana, north of Tel Aviv in Israel, by Skype, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. The next best thing, we're talking about referrals from Israel, referring, of course, to WhoDoYou. Thank you, Yoav.
Thanks for your time. Have a good day there.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Very nice discussion. Cancels?